and give you a little bit of background into alimony and an understanding of it, and then we will, in the coming weeks, go into a little bit more detail so that you understand essentially maybe what your options are and how it's going to relate to your divorce, if it is at all. So generally, alimony is spousal support, and the basis being you have usually the high earner spouse and then a spouse that doesn't earn as much. Upon divorce, okay, the person who doesn't make as much, and it could be the man, could be the woman. Traditionally, it was more women receive it, and I do still think on a percentage basis, when you're looking at these cases in Florida, women are more often than not the recipients of alimony. And I can talk about this too from the women breadwinner side as well, and some things to consider there, and we'll dive into that more later. But so there are several factors that go into the determination of alimony, but the most important is going to be need, how much need you have, as well as how much ability to pay there is. So that is the overall, if you don't meet that, then the other stuff doesn't really matter as much. It all matters because it's not one thing over another. It's collectively. And so then next, we're going to look at the length of marriage. That's really important because it used to be just, we could kind of give you some parameters. Well, they've now added that into the law, and they have clearly defined, okay, a short-term marriage, a moderate length marriage, and then a long-term marriage. And then those play into the law as to what types of alimony may or may not be appropriate or qualify. And so, when you look at a short-term marriage, that is less than 10 years, and you're going to, and that's, again, how they're classified, but a lot of things may also affect that, but you're likely not going to have a permanent alimony situation. And we're going to talk about the types later, so I apologize, but I like to kind of try to bring it into context. And then your moderate term between 10 and 17 years, and then long term is over 17 years. And that's just the way they're defined. But again, we also, you do have need and ability to pay. And then the factors are, really what is also evaluated. And if you're proving an alimony case or disproving an alimony case, you've got to prove or disprove the factors. That's the key. And really in any case, that's the key to prevailing on whatever issue you want to, is understanding, well, what do I have to prove if before a judge, and then how do we do that? And so, of course, you need an ability to pay, the length of the marriage, and then your contribution to the marriage and the duties of each spouse during the marriage. Was there child rearing? If there's a lot of moving and sacrificing of one person's career for the other, that can happen, and just also your contribution to someone else's career or business. And so those are the idea of where that comes from. Of course, they're all listed out. And again, it is different for every case. It's so easy to say, well, I want exactly what, my best friend Sally got. And it just is going to depend. Do your facts match up to that? And, many times when we are in a consult with a client, financial concerns are some of the biggest concerns that prevent women from taking that first step to divorce. And it can be the fear of, I'm not going to have enough, money to live. It's not going to be as comfortable. And or two, I'm going to lose so much financially if I divorce, if I have exposure for alimony, or I'm the saver, he's the spender, I don't want him getting my 401k. So fear of that financial number. And that's why it's really, if you are seriously contemplating divorce and, you know, in a situation that you want to change, the first thing to do is to really get the information, because you may be afraid of something that doesn't even apply to you. So that's that's like usually the first thing I like to go through with everybody is you need to understand how these factors play in. And so that's what we do many times in that, you know, consultation strategy session is assess, well, this is what likely will happen. It's hard to know. And so for anybody to tell you you're going to get X amount of dollars at a first meeting, you know, that's, you know, not really good advice to listen to, because you don't know until you see the financials, until you really work through the financial affidavit. And similarly, you know, if they just say, well, you're just going to have to pay alimony, that may not be the case, because just because, you know, you've been working and make more than your husband, if he's working, you know, and again, it's need and ability to pay. You may have the ability to pay, he may not have the need. And you need to understand how that applies to your specific situation so that you can then make a choice. I mean, hey, I know, you know, so many women, not personally, but that have come through these offices and they're like, I'm not doing it. I'll stay married forever rather than pay him $1, or I'll stay married forever because I just am too scared to live by myself. So you'll be miserable for the rest of your life living in a relationship that's horrible because you're that afraid of what that looks like on the other side, or afraid that money's not going to be enough. And of course, that is your own individual decision, but it's important to understand that there are so many types of alimony. And so what I'm going to do is briefly explain the different types so that you're like, oh, okay, there's more types of alimony or for more situations than I realized. And then in the coming weeks, we'll dive into a few different types a little bit more specifically, give you a little bit more of an understanding of in what situations those apply best, how that works. So the most, like what you would hear first, or how you would understand this alimony view, would be just temporary. And that means while we're litigating, while we're going through the divorce. If, you know, if you're able, most couples would prefer to not have to live together during the divorce. Well, that requires some support being paid while we're going through the motions. So many times, and if you've been, you know, to our office with us, we talk about that, about having a temporary, an initial hearing pretty early on in the case. It's just going to set the parameters of the temporary spousal support, if there are minor children, child support, and or who's going to live where, things like that. It's just a very overall, just to help keep essentially the status quo and allow you to function, because now you have a court order that says, hey, your husband's got to pay you, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 a month in alimony on a temporary basis. So those orders can be really helpful and important because it can set the tone for the case. It can give you a good understanding of the financial documents that we have in the beginning of a case and what that may look like. It can also be very helpful. Many clients have come to us before and they're saying, oh, I'm not paying, I'll never pay you anything, you know, I'll go to jail before I pay you something. I've seen one person go to jail for not paying, and he quickly then paid the order that the court had told him to pay. So those types of behaviors, those types of personalities, sometimes it's best. They're not going to agree on a temporary basis. Sometimes they just need to hear it from a judge. The courts have so much power, and many times that's underestimated by the parties litigating. Sometimes it seems a bit informal over the past year, not having to be in the presence of the court. I don't know if everyone really understands the power. They just have a lot of power. The judges in circuit court and family law, they do have a lot of power, and they can order you to leave your house. They can order you to pay a certain amount, and if you don't, they can have you put in jail and purge the amount. So it's it's important to understand the powers that the courts have. And so sometimes when you have more exposure, maybe you would rather agree to something if you can comprehend it and you appreciate that power and the consequences of not following court orders. So that's where temporary comes into place, and can be a very good tool, a very good part of your overall strategy in the divorce. And so then next, we have what's called bridge the gap alimony. And they're really in no particular order, just kind of the order they come to me in, because bridge the gap is a shorter term alimony. Really intended, as the name is, bridge the gap between married life and single life, and can be ordered up to 2 years. And that is just essentially what is necessary. And so for you to maybe, maybe there's a job that is coming up, or a house has to sell, and then you have to move. There can be so many factors in your life that can support that. And so that's why we will generally talk about that and advocate for that at a final trial. And many times you use 1 or 2 or 3 of these different types of alimony in a case, because that's what's most appropriate. And there's also what's called rehabilitative alimony. And it's not, rehabbing, after being sick. It's just where, when I talked about one of the factors earlier, that was that you gave up your career. The intent and purpose of rehabilitative alimony is for that exact purpose. Let's say you only finished, you didn't complete college, but like, I really want to finish college. I wanted to get a degree in accounting and, go work at a bookkeeping firm, maybe, continue on to get my CPA. And I recognize that I can do this in this amount of time. That is what we would have rehabilitative alimony for, because there's a set plan, usually a plan to become reemployed or educated further in your education, maybe even just you've been out of the workforce for so long, and I mean, it changes fast with technology nowadays, and that's a valid thing. You're really going to need to increase your skills in certain areas in order to compete in the job market. So that one is just as it sounds, the rehabilitative. Now there's durational alimony. That is probably one you'll see more common, and maybe none of the others really fit the purpose. And it's going to be, it can't be longer than the marriage. You might find this in like a 12-year marriage. So it can't be more than 12 years, and but it's usually somewhere between half and a little more than half. That's really it. That's kind of defined by the timing of it. And then there's permanent alimony. And permanent is like it sounds, it's permanent. And it is until death. Death of your husband, or I guess death of yourself, which you don't really care, but I'm sorry, your ex-husband. He dies, obviously he can't pay you anymore. The estate is not going to have to continue to pay, or you get remarried. So, because again, this is essentially to support you for the rest of your life, because you've been married for a long time and meeting all of the other factors. And then there's lump sum alimony. Lump sum alimony is just like it sounds, one chunk of payment. It's more complicated than just, I just want a lump sum in order to prevail on that. But, we'll go into that, further down the road, and I'll explain some of it and how it comes into play, why, and, what makes that sometimes a good route to go. But I hope that this has helped you understand overall. There's a lot of different types of alimony, and they're not mutually exclusive. Many times there's 2 or 3 at one time, or within an overall plan. And, that's done to, of course, get somebody in their best situation. And also, even though you may think, well, I'm exposed, I've been a breadwinner to, we've been married a long time, so long-term to permanent alimony, there may be other options. There may be other things that, you weren't aware of. And when we understand all of the factors and we understand your specific facts, we can then be creative with strategies and help see things in a different way that can get you to the best spot moving forward. So I thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful to you. And please, please join us in the future for more videos on alimony, and Betsy will certainly tell you on how to contact us, but you can certainly post questions as well, as we were going to be following up on these series in the next couple weeks, and love to answer your questions and address your specific concerns. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Heather Quick.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you so much to everyone that could join us today. We are here for you, whether you have a question about alimony or any other family law issue. Please call us at 904-241-0012. Thank you.